The crew of the Vanguard had always known their mission was dangerous. They were humans, explorers of the unknown, pushing the limits of space, the final frontier. But nothing could prepare them for what they discovered in the deep, dark corners of the galaxy. It began with a strange signal. It wasn't much at first, just a pattern of beeps and clicks that seemed like nothing more than cosmic static. But their sensors locked onto it with a precision that couldn't be ignored. The Vanguard followed the signal to its source, an uncharted planet far from the safety of known space. Chapter 31 was meant to be a simple recon. The crew would land, gather data, and leave. But as the ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, something felt wrong. The planet's surface was a ghostly gray, and thick clouds of gas swirled around the ship. The closer they got, the colder the air felt, an unnatural chill that gripped their bones. As they landed, the crew stepped out cautiously, scanning their surroundings. The planet was eerily quiet. No signs of life, no sound, just a vast emptiness that stretched as far as the eye could see. They had landed near the source of the signal, a large, ancient structure buried beneath layers of dust. It looked like a building, but not like any structure the crew had ever seen. It was massive, shaped like an upside-down pyramid, and made from materials that didn't match anything in their database. Its surface glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. Captain Lyle, the leader of the crew, took a deep breath. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Inside the structure, the air was still cold, but the silence was even more oppressive. The walls were covered in symbols, strange carvings that twisted and turned in impossible patterns. They seemed to shift, as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing. The deeper they went into the building, the more the crew felt like they were being watched. Every creak of the floor, every hum of the ship's machinery, felt amplified in the silence. Then, they found it. The central chamber was massive, and at its heart was a pedestal. On the pedestal rested a small, unassuming device, glowing with the same eerie light. The crew gathered around it, their minds racing. What was this? Why was it here? And more importantly, why had it been waiting for them? As they studied the device, Lieutenant Ramos, the ship's engineer, noticed something strange. "There's a message," she muttered, tapping the device gently. A holographic display flickered to life in the air, showing a map of the galaxy. At first glance, it seemed like a simple star chart. But as they looked closer, a red dot appeared in the farthest reaches of space, a location no one had ever seen before. "It's a location," Captain Lyle said, his voice low. "But why show it to us? Why now?" The crew stared at the hologram in confusion. Suddenly, the air around them grew colder, the silence deafening. The device on the pedestal began to hum, its glow intensifying. The walls around them began to pulse in time with the hum, and the entire structure seemed to shake. Then, a voice, low and unearthly, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't a voice anyone on the Vanguard could understand, but somehow they all heard it. It was a warning. "You are not ready." The voice faded as quickly as it had come, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Captain Lyle was the first to speak. "What does that mean? Who's warning us?" They had come to the planet seeking answers, but now they were filled with more questions than ever. What was the device? Who had left it here, and why? And what did the message mean? Before they could consider these questions further, the ground beneath their feet shook violently. The structure began to collapse around them. Dust filled the air, and debris rained down from the ceiling. Panic set in as the crew raced to escape. They had to get back to the ship, back to safety. But the way they came was blocked, and the only path out seemed to lead deeper into the structure. With no other choice, they followed the path. Each step felt heavier, the air growing colder with every passing second. The walls seemed to close in on them, the shadows growing darker. It felt like they were being drawn toward something, a presence that was watching, waiting. Suddenly, they emerged into another chamber, one even larger than the first. At the center was a strange, towering structure. It was a machine, but not one built by any known species. Its surface was covered in the same glowing symbols they had seen earlier. And at the top, a dark portal seemed to pulse with an energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Then, the voice came again, this time clearer, louder. You are the key. The crew froze. What did that mean? The device, the message, the warning. Was the crew part of something much larger, something that had been set in motion long before they arrived? And what was the true purpose of the device they activated? As the machine hummed to life, the crew had no choice but to make a decision. They could try to understand the truth, or they could run. But either way, the truth was coming. And they weren't sure they were ready for IT.AS. They made their way back to the Vanguard. The weight of the discovery pressed heavily on their minds. They had come for answers, but the hidden truth was far more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. And now, the galaxy was watching. The stars had always been a mystery to Captain Nadia Rourke. As a child, she would lie awake at night, staring up at the sky, wondering what secrets lay hidden among the distant stars. Now, as the captain of the Explorer, her job was to unlock those secrets. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to discover in the darkest corner of the galaxy. Chapter 31 began like any other mission. The Explorer was charting a new section of space, venturing deeper into the uncharted regions where no human had ever been. The crew was used to the silence of space, the hum of the engines, the steady beeping of the sensors. But this time, something felt different. There was a signal. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A strange, rhythmic pulse that didn't match anything in their records. Nadia felt a chill run down her spine. "Can anyone identify this signal?" she asked, her voice steady, but with a hint of unease. Lieutenant Harper, the ship's communications officer, frowned at the console. "It's unlike anything we've encountered. It's not a natural frequency, and there's something else. It's coming from an uncharted planet." The team knew this was their chance. If this signal was from another civilization, it could change everything. Nadia made the call. "Plot a course to the source. We're going in." As the Explorer neared the planet, the crew stared out the viewports. The planet was surrounded by a thick, swirling nebula, casting the surface in an eerie purple light. No one had ever seen anything like it. The gravity was strong, pulling the ship in with surprising force. Nadia ordered the crew to prepare for a rough landing. "We've never seen a planet like this," said Dr. Rayner, the ship's scientist. "It's like it shouldn't even exist. But there's something off about it." The landing was rough, but the Explorer touched down safely on the rocky surface. The crew suited up and prepared to explore. Nadia led the way, her boots crunching on the alien ground. The air was thin, cold, and smelled faintly of sulfur. Nothing seemed alive, yet there was an undeniable presence in the air. It was as if the planet itself was watching them. "Keep your eyes open," Nadia said, her voice low. "Something doesn't feel right." They followed the signal, which led them to a strange, dark cave hidden beneath a towering rock formation. The entrance was narrow, but it opened up into a vast underground chamber. The walls were lined with symbols, strange, glowing markings that seemed to pulse with energy. It was clear that someone or something had been here long before humanity ever arrived. Lieutenant Harper moved closer to the walls, scanning the symbols with her device. "These markings, they're not just decoration. They're a form of communication." "What are they saying?" Nadia asked. Harper's face grew pale. "I'm not sure. It's like they're warning us, but in a language we can't fully understand. This place, it's not meant for us." Just as she spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The crew froze, their hearts racing. Something was happening. Suddenly, the walls began to glow brighter, and the symbols shifted, rearranging themselves into a new formation. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet split open. A massive stone door, hidden in the darkness, began to rise, revealing a vast, glowing chamber beyond. "What is that?" Dr. Rayner whispered, his eyes wide with fear. At the center of the chamber, a massive cylindrical structure stood. It was covered in the same glowing symbols that lined the walls, and it hummed with a strange, otherworldly energy. The crew approached cautiously, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were trespassing on something far beyond their understanding. Lieutenant Harper raised her scanner. This is impossible. The energy readings are off the charts. It's not from this time. Captain Nadia's heart raced. What do you mean, not from this time? Harper swallowed hard. I think this thing is ancient, older than anything we've ever encountered. It's not just a machine. It's something else. A weapon. Or a key. A key to what? Nadia asked, her voice tight. But before Harper could answer, the ground shook again. The air around them grew thick with static, and a loud, booming voice filled the chamber. It was a voice they couldn't understand, but it wasn't a warning this time. It was a command. Leave now. The crew stood frozen, the voice vibrating through their bones. Nadia's mind raced. Who was this voice? What did it want? And what was this ancient structure hiding? The voice repeated its command, this time louder. Leave now, or you will never leave. A cold sweat broke out on Nadia's forehead. She motioned for the crew to retreat, but as they turned to leave, the doors slammed shut behind them. They were trapped. We need to get out of here. Now. Nadia barked, but as they tried to find another exit, the walls began to shift. The symbols glowed brighter, and the ground beneath them seemed to twist and turn, like the planet itself was alive and fighting against them. The feeling of being watched intensified. Something was pulling them deeper into the heart of the planet. But Nadia knew one thing for sure: this truth was far darker and more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The signal had led them here. And now, they were about to uncover a secret that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. But would they be able to escape before it was too late? As the walls closed in, the crew had no choice but to face the unknown. And they had no idea if they would make it out alive. The crew of the Astra had been traveling for weeks, searching for answers in the deep reaches of space. Captain Elena Carter knew their mission was important, but nothing could prepare them for the discovery they were about to make. It all started when they received an unexpected distress signal, a single, cryptic message from an unknown source. The message was short but chilling: help, trapped. Under. Chapter 31 was supposed to be a routine exploration. The Astra was just a small ship, designed for scouting and data collection. But when the crew traced the distress signal to a desolate moon, orbiting a dead planet, things took a turn for the worse. The moon was covered in craters, lifeless and silent, with no signs of life. Yet the signal kept repeating, coming from deep within the moon's surface. Are we sure this is where the signal is coming from? Elena asked, her brow furrowed as she stared at the readings on the console. Lieutenant Dawson, the ship's chief engineer, nodded. I've traced it to a massive structure beneath the surface. It looks artificial. Prepare to land. We need to find out who sent that message. The Astra landed near the entrance of a dark, crumbling cave. The crew stepped out, their boots crunching on the loose dirt. The air was thin, filled with the scent of metal and dust. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the walls of the cave. It was clear this was no natural formation. It had been built by someone or something. They followed the signal deeper into the moon's crust, winding through narrow corridors. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that was almost alive. There was a coldness in the air, something unsettling. Every step they took seemed to echo louder than the last, as if the entire moon was watching them. Something's not right here, said Sergeant Mills, the ship's security officer, his hand hovering over his blaster. This place feels wrong, Elena nodded, sensing the same unease. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into. As they descended deeper, they reached a massive open chamber. In the center of the room was a strange, towering structure covered in glowing symbols. It hummed with energy, a low, vibrating sound that sent chills down their spines. At the base of the structure, there was a large metallic door half open, as if inviting them inside. We're getting close, Elena whispered. The signal is coming from inside. Lieutenant Dawson moved toward the door, scanning it with his tools. I've never seen anything like this before. It's ancient. This technology. It's far beyond anything we know. As the door slowly creaked open, the crew stepped inside. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered on overhead, revealing the dark secrets hidden within the chamber. The walls were covered with more symbols, this time glowing a soft green, casting eerie shadows on the floor. In the center of the room stood a large control panel with a single button flashing red. Elena approached the panel, her heart racing. She knew they had to act fast. "Is anyone still down here?" She called out, her voice echoing in the stillness. A voice answered, weak and desperate, "Help. Please, trapped." The crew froze. It was the same voice from the distress signal. But where was it coming from? Elena's eyes darted around the room, trying to locate the source. Lieutenant Dawson stepped forward, his hands trembling as he approached the control panel. "We need to get this open," he muttered. "There's something in here that could explain all of this." Before anyone could respond, the room shook. A loud metallic screech echoed through the chamber as the walls began to shift, closing in around them. The control panel beeped louder, and suddenly, a loud hissing noise filled the air. The door at the far end of the room slammed shut, trapping them inside. "What's happening?" Sergeant Mills shouted, his eyes wide with panic. Elena rushed to the control panel. "The room is locking down. It's a trap." They were trapped, with no way out. The walls continued to move, and the ground beneath them began to rumble. There was no time to waste. Elena pounded the panel, trying to get it to work. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she heard the distant sound of something large and mechanical awakening. "We need to find another way out. NOW!" she yelled. Lieutenant Dawson's hands moved quickly, his mind racing. "There has to be a manual override, something we can use to get out of here." Suddenly, the voice came again, this time louder and more urgent. "Don't open it. It's too late." Elena froze. "What do you mean? Who's trapped here?" The voice trembled, filled with fear. "I was, once like you, part of the crew, of the ship that built this. But it's too late for me. You have to leave, before it gets you too." The room grew darker. The hum from the strange machine grew louder, turning into a low growl that seemed to vibrate through their bones. The walls were closing in, the air growing thin. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. "Get to the ship," Elena ordered. "We're getting out of here. NOW!" But just as they turned to run, the walls began to seal them in. They were trapped, unable to escape. As the final door closed, the crew realized the truth. The last escape had been their only hope, and they had missed it. The Astra was still waiting above, but there was no way to warn them. No way to escape the nightmare they had stumbled upon. And as the darkness closed in, they knew they had made a terrible mistake. But something else had awoken. Something ancient. Something far more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. Captain Alex Harper's heart raced as the Odyssey drifted deeper into the unknown. It had been a routine exploration mission, a small detour to map out uncharted space. But nothing about this planet felt routine. It was an anomaly, a dark, silent world that no one had ever recorded. They had detected a faint signal, one that seemed to call out from the planet's core. "What are we dealing with here?" Alex muttered, staring at the strange readings on the console. "This planet. It's not like anything we've seen." Lieutenant Emma Torres, the ship's geologist, scanned the readings with a frown. "The signal. It's coming from beneath the surface. Almost as if someone or something wants us to find it." The crew of the Odyssey had grown used to strange discoveries, but this felt different. There was an eerie tension in the air, a feeling of being watched. The planet was barren, its surface cold and rocky, with no signs of life. Yet something pulsed beneath it, something powerful, and the crew knew they had to investigate. "Prepare for landing," Alex ordered, his voice steady despite the unease creeping through him. "We need to find out what's down there." The ship descended into the atmosphere, shaking as they passed through the dense cloud cover. They finally landed on the planet's surface with a heavy thud. The crew gathered their gear, their breath visible in the thin, cold air. There was no wildlife, no vegetation, just the hollow silence of the unknown. "Let's move out." "We'll follow the signal," Alex said. Adjusting his helmet and leading the way, as they trekked across the barren landscape. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hum faintly, as though responding to their every step. Emma was the first to notice the strange markings etched into the rocks, ancient symbols that glowed with a faint, eerie light. "These markings, they weren't made by natural forces," Emma said, crouching to study them. "They look like some sort of language." "Can you decode them?" Alex asked, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I can try, but—" Emma paused, looking uneasy. "There's something about this place. I don't think we're meant to be here." Ignoring the warning in her voice, Alex continued forward. The signal grew stronger as they approached a massive, jagged cliff. Hidden in the shadow of the rocks was an opening, a dark, narrow passageway that seemed to lead deep into the planet. "Here's where it's coming from," Alex said. "Let's go." The team entered the cave, their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. The air grew heavier, thick with a strange energy that made their skin tingle. They ventured deeper, their steps echoing in the silence. And then they found it. In the center of a vast underground chamber stood a glowing, pulsing stone. It was massive, nearly as tall as the cave itself, and it radiated an incredible energy. The symbols they had seen on the surface were carved into its surface, but now they seemed to move, shifting in impossible patterns. The stone seemed alive, as though it was breathing. "What is this?" Emma gasped, stepping closer to the stone. Alex reached out, drawn to it, but hesitated just inches away. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's calling us." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was soft at first, like a whisper, but it grew louder, more insistent. "Wake it! Unleash the power within." The crew froze, their eyes wide with fear. The voice wasn't coming from any person. It was coming from the stone itself, as if the planet itself had awakened. "What does it mean, unleash the power within?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not good," Alex said, his instincts screaming at him to leave. But his curiosity and the weight of their mission kept him rooted in place. "We need to figure this out." Before anyone could speak, the stone began to crack. A loud, grinding noise filled the air, as if the very heart of the planet was breaking open. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the walls of the cave started to shift. "Get back!" Alex shouted. The team turned and bolted toward the entrance, but the cave was collapsing behind them. The stone glowed brighter, and an immense force pushed against them, as if the planet itself was rejecting them. "We're not going to make it." Emma screamed as she stumbled, the ground shaking violently beneath her. Suddenly, the voice returned, louder than before, filling the entire cave. "Too late. You've awakened it." The stone exploded with a blinding light. A shockwave of energy shot out in all directions, knocking the crew off their feet. The cave collapsed completely, burying the entrance in debris. But the light did not fade. It continued to pulse, growing stronger, pushing outward. The power from the stone surged through the ground, sending tremors that rattled the Odyssey itself, far above the surface. Alex's mind raced. The stone had done something, it had awakened something deep within the planet. The power of the stone had been sealed away for a reason. And now, they had unleashed it. "We need to get out of here," Alex said, dragging Emma to her feet. "This place is falling apart, and I don't know what that power is doing." They ran back toward the surface, desperate to escape. As they emerged from the cave, they saw the sky above darken, the air thick with a strange energy. The power from the stone was rising, transforming the very atmosphere around them. "The ship?" Emma shouted, pointing to the Odyssey. But as they made their way toward the ship, the ground shook once again. The power was too great, too overwhelming. The Odyssey shuddered violently as the planet seemed to tear itself apart. A massive force, greater than anything they had ever felt, surged through the ground, lifting the ship off its landing pads. The planet was alive, and it was angry. As the crew scrambled to get to the ship, Alex knew one thing for certain: They had awoken something far beyond their understanding. And now they would have to survive whatever force they had unleashed. They had discovered the power within, but at what cost? The Vanguard drifted silently through the vastness of space, a lone speck of light in the endless void. Commander Sarah Mitchell sat at the helm, staring at the star-filled expanse. Her mind wasn't on the stars, though it was on the message they had received. A distress signal from a hidden outpost, lost for years, now reappearing with a cryptic message. Help, before it's too late. It was the kind of message that sent chills down her spine, especially when no one had heard from that outpost in over a decade. No one had even known it still existed. Now, Sarah and her crew were on a mission to find it. But something didn't feel right. "Commander, we've entered the coordinates," Lieutenant Daniels reported, his voice tense. "The outpost is on the edge of the known galaxy. I've never seen anything like this." Sarah nodded, her instincts on edge. "Keep scanning. Let's make sure we're not walking into a trap." The Vanguard slowed as they neared the outpost's location. The planet it orbited was barren, its surface cracked and scarred, with no signs of life. There was no atmosphere, no communication, and no warmth. Just a cold, empty wasteland. "We're not picking up any signals from the surface," Lieutenant Daniels said, scanning the instruments. "No energy readings at all." "Something's wrong," Sarah muttered. She signaled to the crew. "Prepare for landing." The ship descended toward the surface, its engines humming softly. As they approached the outpost, the strange silence grew more intense, filling the crew with unease. The outpost itself was hidden beneath the surface of a massive cliff, its entrance a gaping dark maw. "Looks like we're going in," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, but inside, she felt a knot tightening. The uncertainty weighed heavily on her. She had been in countless dangerous situations, but this one felt different. The crew disembarked, their boots crunching on the dusty, desolate ground. Sarah led the way, her eyes scanning the barren landscape. The air was thin, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on them. They walked for what felt like hours, the only sound the soft rustling of their suits. Finally, they reached the entrance. It was a large circular door, half buried under debris. The door was made of a strange metal, something Sarah didn't recognize, and it pulsed with an eerie, faint glow. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Let's get inside." The door opened with a grinding noise, revealing a narrow hallway. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of old machinery. There were no lights, no signs of life, only the eerie hum of the power system that still seemed to be running. But where were the inhabitants of the outpost? What had happened to them? "We need to find the source of that signal," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Move out." As they ventured deeper into the outpost, they found signs of life: broken equipment, discarded tools, and shattered monitors. The place had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. But where had everyone gone? And why had the signal been sent so many years later? Lieutenant Daniels paused at one of the walls, his face grim. "Commander, look at this." On the wall were strange symbols, glowing faintly, like some sort of warning. Sarah studied them carefully, her stomach turning. She didn't recognize the language, but the symbols were clear enough: danger, death, and a single horrifying word. Silent. A chill ran down her spine. It was a warning, but a warning for what? Suddenly, the floor beneath their feet began to shake. The walls groaned, as if the entire structure was coming to life. A loud, screeching sound filled the air, followed by a low, mechanical hum. "What's happening?" Daniel shouted, his voice filled with panic. "We need to move. Now," Sarah barked. They turned to flee, but the hallway had changed. The walls were shifting, the floor bending. The outpost itself seemed to be alive, reacting to their presence. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the hum that now filled the entire complex. "What's going on?" Ensign Walker shouted, his face pale with fear. Before Sarah could respond, a booming voice echoed through the halls. It was a cold, mechanical voice, one that sent shivers down her spine. "You have awakened the silent war." The words echoed in their minds, and suddenly the outpost was alive with move. The walls twisted, opening into new chambers, revealing hidden weapons, machinery, and strange machines that hummed with energy. "It's a weapon," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "They created a weapon here, and we've triggered it." Sarah's mind raced. The silent war, the weapon was meant to be dormant, sealed away to protect everyone from its power. But now they had awakened it, and the consequences were unclear. All she knew was that they had to stop it before it was too late. "We need to find a way to shut it down," Sarah ordered. "Split up. Search for any control room or terminal that can help us." The crew scattered through the twisting halls, their footsteps echoing in the silence. They encountered strange devices machines that seemed to pulse with energy, and others that appeared to be malfunctioning, their power surging erratically. But no one could find the source of the control mechanism. As Sarah moved deeper into the complex, the voice returned, louder this time. "You cannot stop it. The silent war is inevitable." Suddenly, Sarah's communicator beeped. It was Daniel's. "Commander, we've found it. We've found the core." Sarah rushed to the location, her heart pounding in her chest. They had to act fast. The war machine, the weapon, was ready to launch. If they didn't disable it now, it could destroy everything. As they reached the core, Sarah's eyes widened. The machine was massive, pulsing with raw power, its energy ready to explode. "We can't disable it manually," Daniel said, his voice frantic. "The only way to stop it is to overload the core. But that'll destroy everything." Sarah knew there was no time to waste. They had no choice. With one last look at her crew, she pressed the button to overload the core. The ground shook violently as the core began to explode. The outpost's walls cracked and crumbled, the power surging outward. "We've got to get out of here," Sarah shouted. But as they raced toward the exit, Sarah knew one thing for sure: the silent war was far from over. They had stopped one weapon, but there were many more out there, hidden in the silence of space. And they would have to face them all, one by one.